Welcome to another episode of the Business Builder Podcast. We've got the honor of hosting Jon Markee. He's the founder of My Builder CPA. So if your building software says one thing, QuickBooks is saying something else, and your bank accounts are something worse. This episode is for you. Jon Markee helps builders make sense of their numbers and their margins. Welcome here, Jon. How you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Likewise. So you want to just let the people out there know a bit about your background, what you do in a nutshell and why you chose to be a CPA for builders instead of, some other industry or just more in general?
Yeah, great question. So I've been doing this since April 2017, hard to believe. And we're known as My Builder CPA because we focus on residential home builders, remodelers, and we kind of consider ourselves to be the accounting babysitters. So we take our clients and we hold them by their hand through every step of the process of every financial element of their business. There's no question that we refrain from. We know that basically every email that has a dollar sign that comes to our clients, we can contribute in some manner to their well-being. So we're really focused on a holistic view of success for our clients.
Holistic is a good word, I think, for construction finances because it's a lot more than other businesses typically with just having a clean set of books, right? There's all the job costing and project side of things, and it can get messy and real fast, especially when you're dealing with, field guys and they've got receipts full of coffee stains and and tears and rips and stuff like that. So what are some of like the big kind of mistakes or pain point areas for builders when it comes to keeping their books in order or just having good financial data?
Great question. So the biggest misconception I see right out of the box is that the amazing new cloud-based tools are marketed in a way where it tells home builders and pretty much anyone off the street that they are perfectly well qualified to do their own accounting. And even if it might not take them all that much time or it might not be that complicated, their expertise is better spent in their business, focusing on their core product. And I know that QuickBooks wants to sell as many subscriptions as possible, so they definitely want you to believe that, anyone can be adding transactions from the bank feed, but the biggest thing that we see, I tell everyone the bank feed is a trap. There's always, with every new client we get, there's some kind of mess involving the bank feed. There's something that was happening in the background that doesn't exactly match the bank feed, and QuickBooks just, in all of its glory, tries to get you to add transactions from the bank feed. So I would say right off the bat, that's the biggest thing that we see is problems with the bank feed.
Definitely. One of my recommendations for every early builder who hasn't done it yet is like get a bookkeeper, get an accountant, get your financials off of your plate because essentially you're not trained to do it. You don't have time to do it. And when you're not like comfortable with something or you don't like enjoy it so much, then it just gets left to the sidelines. And that's why so many builders I find get into trouble. And it's like where your numbers at, nothing is even close to up to date. And it becomes a mess. And then no one wants to deal with it until they probably reach out to someone like you, Jon, and then you guys kind of figure things out and smooth it out and all that stuff. So I find yeah. So we mentioned about QuickBooks. I find project management softwares as well, where they all like integrate with QuickBooks and accounting softwares, and it's always like, yeah, no problem. It's, integrates and you have numbers on both sides. But again, it's there's a lot of like kind of hoops to jump through to get things to work properly, and then having them sync and the field guys and all that. How do you deal with like the job costing side of what you mentioned?
Yeah, the biggest thing is always making sure that the job P&L, no matter what job software you're using, Builder Trend, Job Trend, whatever, you need to be able to run a profit and loss in your job software, run that P&L for that specific job, and then go into QuickBooks and run that same report. It's usually called profit and loss by client, or you can even just start with a normal profit and loss and filter it so that you're only looking at that job. And if your job software, like Builder Trend, is notorious for not giving us date-driven reports. So every time you look at a job costing report in Builder Trend, you're seeing all transactions from all dates. That's fine. Just go into QuickBooks and choose the same parameters for your profit and loss there. And then ideally, your total cost number in QuickBooks and your job software, those should be the same. And you would be surprised, even, all of these job softwares advertise two-way synchronization with QuickBooks. It just sounds so easy, like you just hook it up and it just does its thing and we're good. But
Mhm.
with every client we take on, we come across some level of discrepancy between the job software and QuickBooks. And there's all kinds of number of reasons why that might happen, like cost codes that are not mapped, vendors, customers, all of those things have to be mapped between the two. And if you just miss, one of those data fields, you are missing transactions from, one or the other system. And you got to get them to be the same. That's how you know it's working effectively.
Yeah, definitely. So considering that that mapping is correct and it's working properly, what do you see? I know every business is probably going to be different in this regard to some degree, but how do you know which transactions are for which projects or which part of the estimate, which line items and things like that? That's often a challenge in and of itself. So what's like your ideal way that that gets managed and what do you see builders using that's effective or different ways?
Great question. And you're exactly right. It is so different from, every small business is a snowflake to begin with. So, every builder does it a little bit differently, but in an ideal world, we would actually start with purchase orders because that would give us our budget. It's a document that you can give to your vendor or your subcontractor and say, this is how much we expect it to cost. And then if that person sends you a bill after the work is finished and it's a different number, maybe it's higher, then you have the purchase order to go back to say, hey, this was our agreement. Why is it not what we agreed upon? And maybe there was a change order, or maybe it's perfectly legitimate, but it gives you, an official document. And then as those bills and those receipts come in, this is where your people in the field do have to have a basic understanding of your budget. So we recommend people, if they're out, making trips to, the home improvement store, when they get receipts, we recommend writing the job name on the receipt. And then, if possible, also the cost code because that completely takes the guesswork out for anyone in the back office. We know exactly which cost code to book it to, and then there's some kind of photo process in place. So you can use JobTread, you can even use QuickBooks. There's all kinds of software apps out there that will let you take a picture of the receipt. Some of them, will start trying to enter the data for you. That's a little bit of a time savings. It's great. But the biggest thing is having the job name and the cost code written on the receipt. Or, if you always use the same plumber and they're always getting booked to a plumbing cost code, whoever's in your back office should be able to see patterns like that. But at the very least, we need to know what job it's for on the receipt or the bill from the sub.
Mhm. And when you utilize the technology properly, there is a lot of time saving there. And essentially, like you said, you need that critical information like project and ideally item for the project or cost code, if you will. But the rest of it can be really easy. I was talking with a builder the other day. He's doing a multiple millions of revenue, and they were still like you could, the desk behind him was full of papers, and he said he's still entering stuff, and he even brought in his mom sometimes to like come and try to clean stuff up, but it just kind of made more of an issue because she's not trained and doesn't know what's going on, right? So, what do you say to builders who are like, I'll hire, an in-house bookkeeper or my admin person needs some more stuff to do so she can do some of this? How do you work with like the office team or a builder? Like, what's preferred and what's the expectation as far as who does what or how that gets handled?
Yeah, good question. So there's all different levels of office managers and assistants and virtual assistants, and they are not all created equally. So yes, a very high qualified office manager could be capable of capturing those receipts, scanning them, and maybe even getting them entered into your job software and or QuickBooks, just depending on what your workflow process is. But what I see where I see builders getting the most bang for their buck is having that office manager on site who might be able to do an assortment of things in the office, something that a remote employee is never going to be able to do. Like if you have an important client meeting, they can make sure that the conference room is clean, maybe bring in some refreshments. But then, really, that office manager, when it comes to accounting, all they're doing is making sure that the documents get scanned and uploaded to a specialist behind the scenes. And usually, a remote individual comes at a fraction of the cost of what it would cost to have them in your office. And you can get much better talent because that remote individual doesn't have to be in your same geographic area. You can find a specialist who might be located, far away from your office, but they only work with people in construction. So when you come across a problem, it's usually not the first time that they're seeing that problem. They might have seen that problem on another client earlier that day or even last week. But what I see is when one of our clients has a certain type of problem, it's not very long before multiple clients have the same problem. And once we solve it one time for one person, we can just
Mhm.
apply the same process at a fraction of the time in the future. Whereas your office manager, when they come across a complicated problem, it might be the first and only time that they're seeing it. And it takes them, three or four times as long to research it and find a solution. And then in the meantime, the other things that you want them to do in the office, those tasks all of a sudden seem like a lower priority and they don't get done. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Hiring a specialist, you know that the quality and they're going to have gone through it a long time. In the end, it's going to save you time, cost less money, all that stuff. Same as like hiring a handyman to build your home. Like it's probably not going to work out too well. You want to build a home builder that's built, however many tens or hundreds of homes before. So now, as far as the profit side of the business, so if you start working with a client and they're not really making much money. What are maybe some things that you look at or suggest that they look at as far as their numbers to maybe identify profit leaks or ways to improve their, financial health of the business?
I love this question. So we try to operate on a ratio method as much as possible. So we've worked with some thought leaders in the industry, and we have a listing of percentages in the format of percentage of your revenue, your total income. So a percentage of all of the money that you bring in to your business, there's a certain percentage that should go toward, your cost of goods sold, like your direct construction cost. And then there's other percentages for your overhead, like your management salaries, advertising and marketing, all of those items. And so right off the bat, as soon as we can make sure that the profit and loss is clean and it's set up in a format that's pretty, close to what, most people in construction use, we can drill down into those percentages. And so for someone who's not achieving the profits that they would like, we can hone in on some of the costs to see, okay, where is there overspending? Sometimes you don't even know where there's overspending. You forget, we all forget what subscriptions we've signed up for. So, those
Mhm.
are leaks that are easy to fix pretty quickly. And then if your revenue number is not as high as you would like, we can drill down into the specific jobs where you were underpriced. And, some people argue that every problem you have is somehow a result of your pricing. So if you haven't achieved the profitability that you've wanted on historic jobs, we can look to see why is that? Is that because your budget, your original estimate wasn't right, or it was priced incorrectly? And then those are lessons you need timely feedback so that as soon as you go to bid your next job, you're not leaving money on the table.
Definitely. The two big areas that I picked out there were, well, I mean, knowing your percentages across, like having someone that's experienced with it, obviously, but checking your expenses regularly just to make sure there isn't, random things that you're not aware of or stuff that looks out of place. A good thing about someone like yourself as well is you sort of know what other builders are paying for certain things. So I know I've seen this with clients where they may be having some sort of services or subscriptions or what have you. And it's just like twice or three times what I know other people are paying and like giving some suggestions of, maybe you want to go with a different option, or maybe you don't need all this stuff or whatever. I had a client yesterday, we went through her financials as just sort of regular check, and her annual subscriptions had just like two or three of them had come up, and we literally figured out that one of them she could decrease because they weren't really using it as much as they needed. The other one they could eliminate because they had the project management software, which was doing the same thing as this other thing that they didn't need anymore. Ended up saving about $1,500 a year with like a 5-10 minute check. It doesn't take a lot, but it's definitely helpful. And what you mentioned about the pricing, for sure. I like to say your money is made in your estimating, because once the project starts, it's hard to like come up with an extra 5% margin on a project. You don't reach that kind of efficiency gain typically, but it's easy to price that in when you start the project to make sure that you will be profitable on the other side. Can you walk us through a client success story that you've had, maybe where they started, how they, came to you, what their issues were, what you guys worked on, and how you helped them?
Yeah, I can think of a number. So one good example is a custom builder who's operating on the cost plus method. And when they came to us, they were experiencing phenomenal growth. They'd been in business for upwards of 20 years, and they knew that they had never really invested in their accounting systems, but it got to a point where it was finally costing them money because not since they're a cost plus, not all of their expenses were getting captured as billable items to their client. So they had finished a few jobs and they later realized that there was upwards of $20,000 that they had never billed to their homeowner. So that was, so much time had passed after the job was done. They didn't really feel like going, they didn't feel like they could go back to that homeowner and ask for additional funds. They wanted to make sure this never happened again. So we looked at it from multiple angles. First of all, their profit and loss statement just really wasn't working for them. It was just a mess. There was, a huge percentage of all of their expenses were getting booked to miscellaneous office expense. And I know that in the QuickBooks bank feed, it tries to learn your patterns and it will suggest, once you book one little transaction to that account, it thinks, oh, you must want all of your transactions booked to miscellaneous office expense. And then that's how we that's how we get into the trap of the bank feed. So we went through a complete cost code redo. We made sure that it's in the recommended format. That helped them better identify where they were going over in certain categories on each of their jobs. And then we also rolled out a process that was completely standard. So every time they purchased something, there's a mechanism in place to make sure that those transactions get recorded within a few days of them happening. Therefore, we make sure that they're getting billed out to the homeowners. So that one was just a huge organization project, just making sure systems were standardized, people in the field felt empowered to send in receipts. They knew what the process was, even if it were something for overhead in the office versus on the job. And then about 6 months into it, we were able to prevent a couple big things. First of all, they accidentally paid one of their subcontractors $80,000 twice. And just by us catching that, we've basically paid for ourselves, for more than a year.
Yeah.
And then there were numerous instances where things may or may not have been marked as billable. And so by going through everything that was booked on that job, we were able to identify additional revenue that should be charged to the homeowner.
Wonderful. Yeah, with cost plus, it's so highly critical because if you miss something, you're ultimately paying for it instead of forwarding it to your client. And it's very easy for things not to be accounted for. I have a client who was in this state with a client of theirs where it had got to that because they kind of got behind in their invoicing, and they had some change orders in there and whatever. So it was just like avoid those difficult conversations later, right, with your clients of like, oh, by the way, I need another 20 grand for whatever, right? So,
Well, yes. So it's like no matter if you choose cost plus or a flat price, the accounting is really pivotal because even if you're working on a fixed price and job, you want to make sure that every single job related expense is booked to that job, not because it's going to increase your profitability, but it's going to improve your estimating ability for your next job.
Mhm.
And I've worked with a few clients who are, have been surprised at how much it's cost for blueprints, permits, and land surveying. Those are, like three categories. I don't know if maybe we just went through a certain season with those categories, but after we got their books in line, we could quickly see, oh yeah, we need to really increase the amount we're budgeting on these little items because that all factors into the flat price that is shown to the homeowner.
Yeah, definitely make sure there's nothing missed in the job expenses so that estimates should include absolutely everything so you're not left out for lunch. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you, learn more about your services and reach out?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So if you just go to our website, mybuildercpa.com, you can sign up for a financial clarity session right there. If you dig a little bit deeper, you'll be able to find the scheduling link directly with me. On the website, there's also a chat function where you can send me a message and get in touch. And I would be more than happy to have a free session with you, just to give you kind of like a quick assessment of your books and see where you're at and how you're doing.
Wonderful. So we'll put links to the website in the description of this video or audio, depending where you're listening. And no excuses to have messy books or not be clear on knowing your numbers. Reach out to Jon here and his team, and they'll hook you up. So thanks so much for coming on today, Jon, and helping us out with this.
Thanks for having me.